Hey, try this. Spell the word smoke. Go ahead. Fast. Spell poke. Spell joke. Now spell the white part of an egg. Okay, did you get it right? W-H-I-T-E? Yeah, I blew it too. Most people spell yolk. Actually, yolk, the yellow part of an egg, is spelled Y-O-L-K. But what happened there? Well, you've got sensation and perception, two different processes. Sensation is what our senses do. They take in information from the environment, but perception is what our brain quickly does. It interprets, it organizes, it makes meaning out of it so that we can then respond. And it does it very fast, and usually it's doing it very well. But these are some examples of how we mess up. We make mistakes sometimes because we're used to doing certain things a fast way. Here's another. So that's what happened there. Nothing wrong with you if you messed that one up. If you got white, W-H-I-T-E, correct, that is what I said. I assume your ears were working fine, but your brain was thinking ahead because it was used to what we were doing. Here's another example. There's various car models out there. Kia is one brand. I happen to have had Kias for a while. And one of the things I noticed was how do you spell it? How do you spell Kia? Not how do you spell it, but how does the company spell it? What's the logo look like? So go ahead, write down what the logo looks like. What do you think it would say? So here's what most of us, and what I thought. This is wrong. K-I-A. That is not what it is. It's close. This is what the logo really looks like. K-I upside down V. That is true. Go look at a Kia car, walk around the parking lots, go to the dealership, and you can see, look for the logo online. You'll find it on your phone. So we quickly fill in that blank, that little crossbar and the A, and our brain makes it an A, and we don't look at that and go, wait, what is that? Doesn't spell anything. So that, again, it usually is very functional for us to do that. So that's the difference between sensation and perception. Now, early psychologists and researchers who studied perception studied something called psychophysics. They looked at the physics of the environment, the stimulus that causes us to have a sensation, and the psychological process, which is the perception, the interpreting, the organizing, the making meaning out of the information so that we can then use it. So they studied two things. The first thing they studied was very basic. It was whether a stimulus was present or not, whether we just detected something or not. Basic, very faint stimulus. And they decided to call something that it was really at the border, barely detected some of the time, the absolute threshold. Like when you get a hearing test, for example. The absolute threshold is the amount of a stimulus that you can detect 50% of the time. The absolute threshold uses a 50% rule. Half the time you can detect it, half the time it's just so small and tiny you don't detect it. Some common examples for most adults, based on some research: a single candle flame 30 miles away on a dark night. Single candle flame 30 miles away on a dark night. That's like looking from Gresham west towards Beaverton, and you can see the candle flame on a clear dark night half the time, and half the time you won't notice anything. That's a long ways, barely detectable. That apparently is 50% for most people. Another example that I really like is the touch sensation example. That would be a bee's wing falling onto your cheek from a centimeter away. So less than an inch from your cheek, it falls onto your cheek, touches it. Half the time you don't detect that it's there, but half the time you do. Stronger than that, it's above the absolute threshold. Lower than that, it's below. So they use the 50% rule. This can become significant when we're trying to communicate something. Let's say you're whispering somewhere and you don't want people to notice. You want it to be below the threshold. Perfume is the opposite. You want to use a small amount, save your money. It's expensive, but you want people to detect it but not be overloaded. So you want it near that threshold. So the absolute threshold brings to mind subliminal perception. Subliminal perception is cool. So look at this example. Okay, look carefully. Did you pick it up? The you suck in the middle of that? Okay, so an example, maybe not fairly obvious, but most subliminal perception is a little bit less detected. Subliminal means a stimulus is just not detected. It's out of our conscious awareness, but we respond to it. And we're talking about more than just detecting something, we're responding to it in a more complex way. There's some, I don't know, controversy about this. Some people seem to think these preconceived ideas that you can influence many things with subliminal perception. You can make people do immoral things against their values. You can make, I can make you ask out somebody or steal something. The research evidence doesn't back that up. It backs up a little bit of maybe some of our thoughts could be influenced subliminally, but it's not going to magically make us, let's say at the movie theater, flashing on the screen really fast. We can't detect it, but it says we're thirsty, go buy popcorn, and we go spend money because it's there, but we don't detect it. Evidence doesn't back that up. Now, there's a second kind of threshold that was studied by the early researchers called the difference threshold. The difference threshold, which is sometimes abbreviated JND for just noticeable difference, means the same thing. Now we're talking about the 50% rule. Still, it's the same, but we're looking at two things, trying to decide, are they the same or are they different? Two stimuli versus one. Absolute threshold is one stimulus. Difference threshold is two. So are they the same or different? If you can detect there's a difference, half the time, when there really is a difference, that's right at the difference threshold, or the JND. If you cannot, if you think they're the same but they're really two different things, and that you can't detect it at least 50% of the time, it's below that threshold. Sometimes we want it below the threshold, even though we may not be exactly, it's exactly the same, but it's close. Let's say when we're playing music in a band, you've got the keyboard player and the guitar player and the saxophone player all want to be in tune with each other, close enough that nobody can tell the difference, even though there may be a difference. So you want it below that threshold, below 50% of the time. Maybe even 50% would be good for some people, when you're all mixing it together. But you want it, that's the issue with threshold. Or a paint job, where some of the wall is chipped, so I go to the store, buy some paint, touch it up. I want people to detect that there's no difference between the spot I touched up and the rest of the wall. If it's too far above that threshold, then people are going to be able to tell. So that's why it becomes sort of crucial there. So that's the absolute, the difference threshold. Subliminal perception has more to do with the absolute threshold. And in each case, the rule is 50%. Absolute threshold, one stimulus. Difference threshold, two stimuli. One more example of how our perception can steer us wrong sometimes. I did this, and if somebody was with me did this the same way. There's a sign, billboard. Used to be a billboard near Corvallis, and it was in the rural area in between. It just sort of stood up there. Showed a restaurant, some food like pasta, Italian food, the Italian-style tablecloths in the restaurant, red and white checkerboard pattern. At the top, it said, "Legalize marinara." Yeah, and this was a sign that was up just prior to Oregon revising their laws and legalizing marijuana for recreational use. And I read that sign wrong. And so I'm driving by there again, have somebody in the back seat, and I ask them to read the sign, and they say it says legalize marijuana. I said, no, it doesn't. Read it again. And they go, oh yeah. So, there's context in the environment. There's our brain sort of setting things up. We're used to things fitting together, and we fill in the pieces, but we're wrong sometimes. Usually we're correct and our perception is working well. So, answer the questions on the forum, and I'll see you next time.